Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rebecca Saunders Show. Today I am joined with the fabulous Shelly Horton. Thank you so much for joining me, Shelly.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's so much fun. I cannot wait to dive in. But a bit of background for the viewers, listeners today. Shelly is a journalist for 9 and 9 Honey, a fabulous MC. I've witnessed her full go at stages and in the studio as well. She's also a fantastic presentation and media trainer, which I will want to touch on later, Shelly, all about camera confidence. I want to dive into that later. I know that's scaring a lot of people that listen to me is about getting in front of the camera, and you and I do it so well.
Absolutely.
We do. But I want to go back to the beginning, Shelly. You and I were talking when you were in the studio before about the background to your career, what was driving you to do that. You know, I think if I remember correctly, you were doing written journalism before you went into being on camera. Describe that journey for us, and what was it in journalism that you wanted to be part of?
So it wasn't in written, it was in radio. So I did my journalism degree and did a double major in broadcast journalism. So I only did radio and TV, no print. And then I got my start with ABC Radio, and I just fell in love with the medium. I love what you can do with sound, and I started as a crime reporter, which is basically the most exciting thing you can ever do, because I was out on murder hunts and first on crime scenes, and I've seen 7 dead bodies, which I love. And my mother is appalled by that, but I'm like, no, I haven't needed therapy. I'm going to solve the murders. I was totally like I was living in an episode of CSI. But it was funny because I'd always dreamed of working on, but I didn't think I was the right look for TV, because I've always been a bit bigger, and all I ever saw on TV were really skinny size 8 blondes, and I'm a curvy redhead. Let's just say I've had many hair colors, but I have pretty much
enough.
yeah, yours were just many different wigs. But yeah, I've become known as the curvy redhead. So I wasn't really brave enough to say that I wanted to be on TV. And I think it was one of those, you can't be what you can't see, because even when I was growing up, if a woman in TV got pregnant, they'd just raise the desk where she was a newsreader until it was too obvious, and then she'd go on leave and may not come back. Like, it was one of those things where really there was no size diversity at all on TV. And, I still think it's a bit of an issue now. And I'm glad that I pushed through. So it was actually when I was in London after 4 years at ABC that I got my break in TV. And that was because I think when you're in another country, you have this bravado and no one really checks up. So I had this incredible situation, which is probably not the best career advice for people, but basically I lied to get my first job on TV. So I was working at a TV station called Channel 1, which was kind of like Sky News in Australia in that it was 24-hour rolling news. And I had a very boring job in the newsroom, but I was excited to be doing it because I was just checking people's spelling and grammar and, making sure that the rundown was correct. Not very exciting. But then one day, I'd only been there about 6 weeks. One day, the sports presenter came in, and let's just say everyone knew he had a bit of a cocaine issue, and he'd been on the bags all night, and he lost his voice. So all of the other journalists were out on stories, and the executive producer, Virginia Troussard, turned to me, 24-year-old me, and said, "Shelly, did you ever read the news on TV in Australia?" And I just looked her straight in the eye and I went, "Yes." When in fact, I haven't even been into a TV station before. So big fat lie. But it was amazing because then I couldn't back out of the lie and I couldn't tell anyone else. So I had to go to hair and makeup, and of course I was reading the sports news, which is all those hard names, and I was, absolutely, shaking in my boots.
Yeah.
I got in there though, and I just sat down with that real fake it till you make it kind of attitude, with a bit of a smirk, as if like, it's strap yourself in, people. This is going to be a bumpy ride, but let's have some fun with it. And I read the sport, and here's what happened. I made 4 mistakes in like my 5-minute bulletin, which is completely unprofessional, but I kind of stumbled through. But then at the end of the bulletin, I was rushing because I just wanted it to be over because I was so scared. And what I did was I was just reading the auto cue. So because I was just reading, I said Plymouth instead of Plymouth.
Oh,
yeah, that one.
Yeah.
They could forgive the hard names. They could forgive tennis players and football players' names, but they couldn't forgive Plymouth. So the switchboard lit up, and there were all these complaints. Now, this is back in like 1997. And so the complaints were, why have we got a convict reading the news? Like, why have we got a kangaroo reading the news? You know, that sort of thing. Anyway, by the time I finished the bulletin, they'd called in a legit TV reporter, and she filled in for the rest of the day. And then the next day, the CEO called me into his office, and I was petrified because I didn't even have the right working visa. You know, I was so
just making it. You're just
Gen
making it
Y before Gen Y ever existed. And so I just said, you know, I'm so sorry. He's like, yeah, we had a lot of feedback. And I'm like, I know, I heard. It was an emergency. I was filling in. He said, here's the thing. Everyone who was complaining is kind of making fun of you, not actually making a formal complaint. Like, there was no real anger. He said, so I watched it back. And you know how they say some people have that it factor? Well, you've got that it factor, and I'm going to give you your own entertainment show.
Amazing.
So at 24 years old, I had my own show. It was daily, and so that meant 7 days a week because this was a 24-hour news station. And I reviewed, you know, gigs and comedy nights and movies. I got free tickets to everything. It was incredible. And I didn't ever tell anyone that I had actually lied. And then only, I think it was 2 years before COVID hit, my husband and I went back to London, and I caught up with Virginia Troussard, and I finally got to get the guilt off my shoulders.
Did she not know until that time?
No. And I just said to her, Ginny, I lied. I'm so sorry. And she punched me in the arm and said, you bugger. And then she said, I'm so happy that I'm the one that gave you your break because you deserve to be on TV. And I've loved watching your career, you know, just climb after that.
Incredible. I absolutely love that. And I can, oh my gosh, that's so good. And I could feel it as you were telling that story of, you know, when you move to a new country and you can just go for
it. You can be anyone you want.
Completely. When I moved to Australia, it was, I've got a nationwide video production company.
Exactly.
I don't know anyone else, but I'll figure that out as I go. Like 10 years later, I do now. Actually, it's global.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the time, I've got nothing to fall back on. Like, but we're just going to go with it. And that's what I want to do. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that. I tend to call it being economical with the truth, though, although yours was a fat lie.
Mine was a big fat lie. Yeah. I just figured that she was desperate and there wasn't enough time to Google. So it was all right.
So you've had the chance to do that, though, Shelly, and you've done a whole heap of other stuff. And you're now an advocate across, I'm going to say specifically 9Honey, but I'm sure there's other elements to what you're doing now, where you are talking and publicly being an ambassador for women's issues that everyone considers a taboo. So not only have you gone, I'm going to look and be different on the TV, and it's been what's made your career, what then pushed that next level to go, I'm just going to knock it up a notch and start talking about all the stuff people don't want to talk about?
Well, I think it stems originally from the fact that I'm child-free by choice. And when I first spoke about that, which was honestly 15 years ago, there was such a public backlash that I was trolled horribly. It was quite distressing. I had people tweeting me saying, you're a waste of a uterus. A woman who doesn't want children is not a real woman. And my favorite, which was, you're so selfish, you're not breeding future taxpayers. was like, oh my God. So I think because I went through that and came out the other side, because as well as all of the negative and really personal, horrible attacks, I also had some beautiful stories where people contacted me and said, hey, I am 32, I'm married, I'm from a very traditional Catholic Italian family. My parents won't stop asking me when we're going to have kids, and my husband and I don't want to have kids. I've told it to them many, many times, and they keep saying, oh, you'll change your mind, or, you know, you'll love them once they come, all of that sort of thing. And so this woman wrote to me and said, what I did is I printed out your article and I just put copies around the dining room table, and I said, everyone, we need to read this article and have a proper discussion. And she said, everyone read it, and her mum cried, her dad cried, she cried, but they finally accepted her decision. And she said, I didn't know how to put it into words. You did, and you've just helped me. And, you know, I can't thank you enough. So for me, there will always be the people who criticize or try and pull you down when you are talking about taboo topics. But then there's also you being a voice for the voiceless. And so that's sort of become a little bit of a passion of mine. So after Childfree by Choice, then I kind of moved into weird medical stuff because I actually am fascinated by that. And
is this like the iteration of the crime dramas for you? Like, I've done crime, now I'm going to go into medical and see what can happen.
There's a theme, you know. So yes, I have a podcast on Audible with Dr. Jenny Mansberg, and it's called Things You Can't Talk About on TV. And that was exactly the topic. If, you know, Koshi on Sunrise would talk about it, then there's no way it could be on our podcast. So we would discuss everything from semen to, you know, Armageddon periods to what things have actually been found up people's butts, you know, like fascinating, interesting stuff. And Dr. Ginny gives the medical advice and the research around things. We even did an entire episode on farts and why they smell. And do you know that there are actually researchers out there, and they are fart sommeliers who actually they have researchers fart into like plastic pantaloons, and then they have these researchers who have to sniff to rate farts. That's an actual job.
That's mind-blowing. I don't know if I'm impressed or disgusted. I don't know.
Someone's got to do it. So that's been probably a good 5 or 6 years I've been doing that with Ginny. And now my biggest thing is I want to talk more about perimenopause, because I'm 48 and it hit me when I was 47, and I hadn't even heard the term perimenopause before. And I think that this is, again, it's another taboo that we need to break down, because if I'd known more about it, I would have sought help earlier. So I don't have periods anymore because I have a Mirena coil, which is like an IUD. And then all of a sudden, 2 years ago, I just started bleeding again. And then in November, I bled for 32 days. And all of this was happening. I lost my desire to work. I was crying all the time. And you know me, Beck, I will cry in a Qantas commercial, but
yeah, you let the tears out, then you pick it all back up and off we go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But this was like sobbing for no reason and big fat tears. And it wasn't until I went and had my blood tests and found out that I was perimenopausal that I could get some help. And I've gone on to HRT. I've had to go on to antidepressants for the first time in my life, which was very confronting because I've written about all of these things and been such an advocate for people, you know, not feeling shame around mental health. And then when I had mental ill health, I then felt shame, not from anyone else, but from myself.
Internally,
so lots of sort of battles. So I just feel if I can be brave enough to step up and talk about these taboo topics, it's going to help other people. And maybe someone will get some help before having to go through what I went through.
100%. And that's what that's what inspires me the most, I think, about you. And I've known you for a while now, in terms of just being able to, well, it's a human thing. Let's talk about it. It's not a taboo thing. If you can do that, then you can have that rippling impact that is immeasurable, really, in terms of the ripples. And I know you've helped me get my own story out as well in terms of doing the hair-free thing. And I don't think I would have done that really as soon as I did if we hadn't had that initial conversation, you know, that you would even be aware of, you know. It was more
no, we were sitting there and it was hot and you were wearing a beanie and you were like, I'd really like to, you know, not face this. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Take it off, own it, you know. And I think I said to you, be known for fabulous earrings, like, you know, choose something else.
You did, and I went and bought them from the gift shop on the way out the door, like.
Yeah, so I think society is progressing in that we just don't want to follow the same path as everyone else. We actually want to embrace our individuality and our uniqueness. And so I think, yeah, that's why you should be rocking the bald head and why I should be talking more openly about the fact that I've been bleeding for 32 days straight.
Yeah. You have to share it. And, you know, I didn't share this now. I'm going to share it on the podcast with you as I'm talking. But I've done the whole hair-free thing now for 4 or 5 months. I went to my first event you know, producing an event and big conference room. They get cold. I had no idea. I was freezing. And so I'm going to have to find myself a stash of those beanies that I can sort of blend in with, because I had goosebumps everywhere.
And you know why? It's because I'm up on stage in front of the bright lights and I'm like, I'm perimenopausal, make it colder.
Make it colder, yeah. We'll work a way of existing in the same room together at some point, I'm sure. So for people listening to this and watching us talk about it, you and I have done a lot of work in being comfortable talking about this kind of stuff. If someone is just starting out going, I want to talk about it, I don't quite know, where do I start? What would be your advice to them in saying something, standing up, particularly if the people around them aren't interested in them speaking up in that sense, shape, form?
I think it's important to practice in private first so that it's not your very first attempt. So the way I think about it is, if you want to play tennis, you take some lessons. You know, you go and practice and then you might challenge someone to a match. So for me, whether it's public speaking or, you know, stepping up, even just in front of your webcam, doing Zoom or making social media videos, just practice them. You don't have to publish them at first. My next advice would be to publish them in stories or something that disappears after 24 hours, because it still gets it out there, but it's not going to be there forever. And then just the more you do, the better you'll get. The more that you do, like even your course, Beck, like getting people in there to learn all of the basics and make sure that you've got a little bit of knowledge behind you, then do some practice. And then once you're a little bit more advanced and you want to do my course where it's that real polish to your presenting, then you take it to the next step. So it's kind of investing in yourself and also investing some time. I think a lot of people just expect because they can talk, it means that they can present on camera or present in front of a crowd of people. And it's very different skills. It takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of preparation, and then it takes getting up there and doing it and getting some runs on the board. So I think, you know, making sure that you don't be too hard on yourself and don't expect huge improvements very quickly, but keep chipping away at it. I love, Beck, that you've been live 365 days a year. Like that in itself, that is a huge effort, but it's completely paying off.
Oh, completely. And, you know, you look back at it at the beginning and go, oh, okay, that was bad. I'm just going to leave it there. And I talk to people about it a lot, particularly inside our course, but I talk about it on socials all the time. You're comparing yourself to someone that's doing it 10 years. They've been practicing for 10 years versus your day one. And
absolutely.
I think that's something to be really mindful of, particularly when looking for someone for inspiration.
Yeah. And before social media even existed, I was doing TV, which is presenting skills. So, you know, I've had 25 years of preparing myself for this crazy new ride that is social media. So I always urge people when it comes to social media to never compare and despair. You know, don't follow someone and just go, I'll never be as good as that, or they're so polished, or I don't I'll never be at that standard, because as you said, they've been doing it a lot longer and they weren't at that standard when they started. So make sure that you don't get disheartened. And also, here's another controversial bit of advice: don't hate follow. Like, if there's someone that just hate follow is when you follow someone that you don't really like, but maybe are pretty good at what they do. And every time you watch it, you're kind of a little bit jealous and a little bit makes you a little bit off edge. Stop it.
Yeah, stop following them.
You're in charge of your feed. Yeah. Unfollow. Easy. You know, I've had people I've unfollowed. They have no idea I don't follow them, but I'm just like, no, you're not my jam. And I don't like feeling that jealousy or feeling that that part of my personality. So I'd rather just cut it out.
Yeah, it's a really horrible feeling. I know it's something you do have to just cut out. One thing I also like to do, or tell people to go and do, is to go and look back at all the beginning videos that the people they're aspiring to be have created, because all the good ones, leave them up. They're all still there in the depths of YouTube to go and have a look at. And
I know. But seriously, with my feed, you'd have to scroll back and like you'd get RSI over the finger, scrolling, because I put something up just about every day. So it would take some delving.
Completely. But, you know, if you need that inspiration, you can go digging and it's there.
Please.
Practice is there. So, Shelly, you touched on it before about camera training, right? Like in terms of speaking to a camera, it is very different to speaking on a stage or in front of people. And you teach this, and I've seen you in action doing it, and you and I will work together when I'm going to up my game the next time up. I know it's in my sights. You've known that for a while, but what can people expect from camera training, and what is it? You know, we've spent 2 years all being on camera. What's the difference? What is actually upping the level?
So it's taking away the fear, basically. So when people come and do training with me, I do it mainly via Zoom now. And again, if COVID hadn't happened, there's no chance I would have done anything via Zoom. But now everyone's time is so valuable that you just don't want to waste time traveling to be in person. So I do it via Zoom, and I break it down. So basically it's a 4-hour course, and the first hour is me teaching lots of tips and tricks about being on camera. And it's a lot of the stuff that you talk about, and I hear you talk about all the time, Beck, like the eye line. Like at the moment, I'm looking directly at the camera, even though every part of my being wants to look at myself. Oh, that's better. Or look at you, or look at myself. Like we're like a budgie in a mirror, just wanting to look at ourselves. But you have to train yourself to look at the camera. You need to understand the basics of lighting and your backdrop and the technical side of things. Then I also talk about, you know, what to wear on camera. But then I get into more of the psychology, and that is definitely preparing so that you're not winging it. I don't ever believe in winging it when it comes to presenting on camera. If you even just take 5 minutes beforehand, create some dot points so you've got a bit of structure, that takes some of the nerves away. And I also bring in some really practical training, because when I was at ABC for that 4 years, I had voice training every single week, an hour every week for 4 years. So I'm using some of the skills that the voice teachers taught me about how to actually relax the muscles in your face and your jaw and your tongue so that your body's prepared. So once you have your body prepared, you're looking good, you've got the lighting right, and you've got your dot points organized, you will be more confident speaking on camera. And then for the next 3 hours, I set up mock interviews as a journalist. So I find out where you would love to be. So if you say to me, I would love to be interviewed by Carl Stefanovic on Today's Show, I then channel Carl, create the interview, and put you on the spot as if it's live TV. Or if it's that you've always wanted to, say, be speaking, doing a keynote speech at Business Chicks, I introduce you and then you have to start your speech. So it's very practical. And then what happens is my husband, Darren, films it, and then we stop and watch it back on the spot, which is quite confronting.
It is.
A lot of people get that, you know, the heart flutters from that one. But it's just the fastest way to learn, because once you see yourself on camera and you see that your eyes are darting all around the place, or you see that you have a repetitive gesture that keeps like flicking into the corner of a screen, you stop doing it really quickly.
Yeah.
But without recording it, you don't even know that you're doing it. So it's quite an intense course, but it's something I'm super proud of, that by the end of it, you have the tools to then practice at home and continue and just keep improving.
Yeah, it sounds phenomenal. I can't wait to dive into that next year.
I'm
Like,
pretty
it is
proud of
just,
it.
I've seen people go through it. I've seen your behind the scenes of it. It looks amazing. And just to get that level of expertise, from you and doing this for the last 25 years, going, okay, you've got 4 hours of your undivided attention,
Yeah, that's why I like to do it one-on-one as well. So it's completely tailored for that person. So it's intense for the client and also quite intense for me, because I have to be on my toes the entire time. But I also, even though I don't want to have kids, I feel like a proud mother hen, because I see people who've done my course and then they're popping up on TV and I'm like, oh, I made that. So it's actually quite fun.
I love that. And Shelly, thank you. I could deep dive into this for hours and hours, and you and I have done so previously, but thank you for coming and chatting this through. And I'm so excited to see what comes of next year for both of us, in terms of listening to what conversations you're going to share with the world. I'm
But also,
very intrigued.
let's make sure the next time we do the podcast, it's more authentic and real, in that we have champagne in our hands.
Completely.
Because that's the way we roll.
Yes, it's a date.
I love it.
Before I let you go, where can people find you, Shelly?
Just come to shellshockedmedia.com, and that's my website. You can find all about the courses there, or just follow me on socials, which is at Shelly Horton 1. I know, annoying, but there isn't a Shelly Horton in the US, and it's a guy. How weird's that? American names are weird. So yeah, Shelly Horton 1.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Shelly. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.